So I'm really glad to be here today. I appreciate Hillary inviting me to once again share some of my favorite stuff with everyone. So today I'm going to talk about one of my very favorite topics, which is using children's literature to teach about personal finance and economics. So certainly when I was doing my PhD in economics, I never thought that this is what I would be doing, but I always try to tell everyone the fact that I think that this is some of the really the best stuff that we do in this field, because it really gets at some of the really most important personal finance concepts. And I also really truly believe that starting early is really essential to getting kids up and running. I think that in the long run, one of our most important things that we can do today in order to improve financial literacy nationwide is to start very young with kids, and using children's literature is one of the very best ways to do this. So certainly over my time in this field, I've spent a lot of effort over that time looking at children's literature and how we can use it to teach personal finance. So the standard disclaimer applies, which is the views that I expressed in this presentation are my own and are not necessarily those of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. So there have been a number of different projects by different groups over time to write children's literature lessons. Some of you may remember back a number of years ago, Spec Publishing had quite a number of lessons. The Federal Reserve Banks of Philadelphia and St. Louis, the economic education teams have picked up the mantle of that work, and in many cases we've been reworking some of the old spec lessons. My colleague Mary Suter at the St. Louis Fed was one of the original spec authors. So this is a joint venture that we initially began between our two reserve banks, but since then we've had folks from Kansas City Reserve Bank and some other reserve banks, as well as both graduate students and faculty at the University of Delaware who've also participated in writing lessons for this project. And the lessons can be found both on the St. Louis and the Philadelphia Fed's websites. And you can also always search for them at federalreserveeducation.org. So if you're ever looking for a resource and you know that it's a Federal Reserve resource and you can't remember where it came from, you can always go to federalreserveeducation.org. That's usually the very best place to find all the resources. That is our portal site that gives you access to all 12 Reserve Banks materials, plus those of the Board of Governors in Washington. The lessons that I'm going to talk about today are primarily on personal finance, but we have both personal finance and economics content in the lessons. Most of the lessons we've written for K4. Now, one of the reasons for that is it's always much easier to use a picture book or a relatively short book that would be for primary grades than it is to get into the chapter books, because oftentimes in the chapter books the amount of content that you actually have that's related to personal finance and economics is relatively small. Maybe it's one chapter or something like that. That doesn't mean that chapter books aren't valuable. It doesn't mean that if you're teaching using chapter books or you're looking for a chapter book that has personal finance that we can't help. We certainly can, but it's been easier generally for us to write lessons at the K4 level in this space. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how even if you don't teach K4, you can make use of this material in a very valuable way. We know that over many, many decades, this field has done a really good job, and by that I mean economic education, personal financial education, of using children's literature, and has gotten very good results historically from this in terms of increasing student achievement related to personal financial education and economics by using lessons that rely on children's literature. One of the things that has been going on since the 1970s is research looking at when is it that kids develop their ideas about money. So occasionally, and I'm sure that Hillary and our colleague Kathy Bowen is also on the line, have experienced this, where someone says, well, you know, I think that personal finance should be taught just in high school. Well, it's very clear that kids develop ideas about money starting very young. So people like Mark Shug in the 1970s were doing research looking at what do kids think, and I'm talking 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, when they go to the store with their parents. Well, initially they think that the exchange that's going on is one between two friends, their parent, let's say, and the shop owner. But then they quickly begin to understand what money is and how money works. They also have a tendency to develop incorrect ideas. So, for instance, you might ask a kid, where does money come from? And a 6-year-old might tell you, out of the ATM machine. Now, yes, cash currency comes from there, but we want kids, even at a young age, to start to understand that you earn income, and that's where money comes from. So the primary grades represent a significant, and as I often say, underutilized opportunity to start kids off on their understanding of personal financial education and personal finance and economics. So this is a really valuable time to get the very core ideas, both in terms of economics and personal finance, into their understanding, get the vocabulary into their lexicon. And so really I encourage you to think more about how can we do more at the primary grades. One of the things that is interesting is that research shows that kids can learn much more at this grade level than what people might think. So those, maybe parents or maybe it's administrators who have only taught at the high school level, etc. They may not be aware just how much kids can learn at this level, and I've even seen this myself in observing relatively young kids, elementary school kids, understanding and using economics concepts in their daily lives, in classrooms, etc. I put this third bullet point there, that a comprehensive economic personal financial education is much more than identifying and counting coins. I was recently talking to an administrator in a school district, and it was clear to me that she did not understand what I was talking about with economic and personal financial education, because she was basically telling me that in first grade it's about counting coins, as kindergarten is about identifying coins, and that's all it is, and it can be and should be much more than that. Now, one of the things you might say is, well, I teach secondary. How can I make use of children's literature lessons? Well, I think this represents a really excellent opportunity for high schools and elementary schools, whether they're in the same district or not, to partner. So this can be a service learning type project where high school students who are, let's say, in a personal finance course could visit elementary schools and read to younger children and then teach using these lessons. The nice thing about these lessons is they're extremely well designed. They have nice, fun activities in them, and they also have very good procedure steps that really lay out exactly what discussion questions are going to be and what the expected answers are going to be. And we all know that one of the best ways to learn a concept is to actually have to teach it to someone else. So even if you teach secondary, I encourage you to use these lessons. They're a relatively inexpensive way to get a service learning project going that can help younger kids, because we know oftentimes this may not be taught in their elementary school, and also get your high school kids engaged in understanding these concepts in a different way as they teach them to younger kids. So I'm going to jump right in and talk about a few of the lessons that we've developed over the years, give you a little taste of what they look like. Now, generally, if we were doing this live, I'd read the story to you and we would actually do the activity. But in this case, with the slides, I'm just going to sort of describe the activity and show you some of the books. I'm going to start off with Uncle Jed's Barbershop, one of my absolute favorite books. This is by Marjorie King Mitchell. I had the opportunity to meet Ms. Mitchell a few years ago when the National Council on Social Studies was out in Kansas City. We presented a session together at the National Council on the Social Studies, and it was just a really fantastic opportunity to meet the author, to hear the story about how she wrote this book, etc. I wrote the lesson that goes with this one. I'll tell you at the end of the session how you can get access to these free PDFs for these lessons. But this is a really fantastic book. So the students listen to the book as you read it to them, and it's about this African American barber. I'll go back one slide just so you can see there. There he is cutting his niece's hair, or pretending to cut her hair. And it's really about a story of this family that's growing up in the segregated South before the Great Depression. And he's saving. He's saving because he wants to have his own barbershop. He's really itinerant. He goes around on a mule, and he cuts hair all around the county, but he wants to have his own barbershop, and he starts off saving. She then gets sick, and he actually uses his saving then to get her surgery. He starts saving again. The Great Depression comes. The bank that he had put his money into fails. And he starts again after that. So one of the things that also about this story is it talks not only about saving and savings goals and opportunity cost and as well as segregation, but it also talks about stick-to-itiveness and how sometimes it's difficult to meet your savings goal and you have to work over time, sometimes because maybe there might be setbacks or things come along in the short run that you have to spend money on, but that long run savings is something that is a lifetime effort. So it's a really great story in that way, and we have lots of great discussion questions related to it. We do an activity with the students where they work in groups. They have a saving and spending register, and in this case they're saving up $50 for a new video game, and they draw cards, and there's some of the cards I'm showing there. And these are actually some spending cards. So they take in money with this, and they also spend money with this. And depending on how the cards are shuffled, etc., it takes them a little bit of time to save up to meet their goal. And so for different groups, they're going to have different events that are going to come along, and it's going to take them different amounts of time to reach the goal. So there's some more of the cards that are there that are part of this lesson. So that's one of our favorites, and I think it gives kids an opportunity again to see that sometimes it's really hard to reach your savings goal. You have to work extra hard at it, and sometimes you wind up having things that come along, like paying dues to your recreational club, that make it more difficult to reach your goal. And of course, you collect your allowance if you're a kid along the way, and if you're an adult, you earn your income. Another lesson that we worked on, and this was a joint venture between myself, my fantastic colleagues Bonnie Mazzaros at the University of Delaware, Mary Suter at the St. Louis Fed, and then Judy Austin, elementary school teacher in Newark, Delaware. We worked on this. This is Less Than Zero by Stuart Murphy, and I actually included a picture of Stuart there. Stuart has written quite a number of books that are part of this Math Start series, and so they're incorporating both reading, language arts, as well as math into these stories, and a lot of the stories involve economics or personal finance concepts. So we wrote this lesson to go along with Less Than Zero. Here's a few little screen captures. Again, I would likely read the story to you if you were here live and we were able to be together. But this is a little penguin. The money in the story is clams, and he's actually graphing his income versus his spending and seeing really what his net worth is over time. He's trying to save up as well to reach a savings goal. So here, Perry, by the end, he wants to buy a scooter. He needs 4 more clams. And then at the end, he actually gets a little job. Mr. Spike pays him to shovel snow for him. So in this one, the students are learning about saving and savings goals, interest, borrowing. They can use number line or a line graph in different states. If you're 8 to 10 years old, you might be using a number line, or you might be graphing at that point. We include the number line, the line graph visuals and activities that are there. So it's a great opportunity to incorporate some graphing as well as get at those concepts of saving and savings goals. Is actually On the Court with Michael Jordan. This was written by my colleague here, Todd Zartman. And this book really looks at Michael Jordan when he was young, how it affected his the decisions he made then, and how that affected his future life as an NBA player. So the students participated in a simulation to learn about choices, alternatives, opportunity cost, human capital. Here we introduce the concept of the paced decision-making grid. So we are teaching this at elementary school, middle school, and high school, and this paced process appears in a lot of different curricula. It appears in Financial Fitness for Life, for instance. And then we assign the students to different groups based on human capital. So one of the things is, you make investments in your human capital, whether that is going to school or training or practicing basketball, for instance. And then in those student groups, they actually build cup towers, and the different groups have different levels of human capital. So the concepts here are alternatives, decision-making, human capital, and opportunity cost. This is the PACE decision-making model. So if you're not familiar with it, first you have to identify the problem or the decision that you have to make. That's the P. Then you list the alternatives, so the alternative outcomes. That's the A. Set a set of criteria on which you're going to evaluate those different alternatives. And then in this case, we're using plus, minus, or question mark to identify whether the option, the alternative, is meeting the criteria or is not meeting the criteria or it's uncertain. And then finally, making a decision based on that evaluation. So this is a method of getting kids, getting adults to think through the process of whatever their decision is going to be. Think through the process, identify the problems and alternatives, evaluate based on a set of predetermined criteria, and then make a decision. And then this is the little table, the grid that we use, where we have the criteria running across the top and the alternatives as the rows. These are our little, so the students are giving a certain number of paper cups, some tape, etc. And then you have 5 different groups. This kind of activity appears in other places where we're looking at human capital. So you have the high school dropout group, that's in the upper left there, that card. Those team members have both hands behind their back. So they have limited skills and education compared to the other groups. So it's going to be very difficult for them to be able to build this tower. You go all the way up to the graduate student, they have the highest level of education and they have no limitations. They can use both hands, etc. The group with the college degree, they have full use of their hands, and the team then can designate one person who can talk, but the rest of them have to communicate non-verbally. And you see how difficult it is for some of the groups that have less education, less human capital, to be able to build that tower. So it's a really great way of illustrating how investments in human capital, whether it be education, training, practice, all have their impact then on the amount of work and the quality of the work that's produced in the end, what the outcomes are in terms of productivity, etc. So that's a great lesson there, and again, a chapter book. One of my absolute favorites is Saturday Sancocho. This one's a little bit more in the traditional economics vein. This was a Reading Rainbow book, a really fantastic book. Leila Torres is the author. This is a book about a little girl who visits her grandparents every week, and every week they make a chicken stew called chicken Sancocho, and they don't have money to go and buy the ingredients, but they have a whole bunch of eggs, and so they take those eggs to the market and they do successive bartering with others in the marketplace in order to get the ingredients to make the Sancocho. So it's a great book about barter, and then you can actually get the kids to understand how, if you had money, money makes it a lot easier. So this is the traditional barter versus money story. So they listen to the story, they complete sentences that record the various trades that are carried out by the family to obtain all the ingredients of the Sancocho. And then we actually have some cards, and the students actually barter those cards in order to get their own ingredients. And then in a second round, you collect the cards back up, you run it again, and this time they have money cards. And when they use the money cards, they're then able to usually get it a little bit easier. They don't have to make as many trades. They don't have to, for instance, trade for something that they don't want in order to get something that they do want. So it gives a good opportunity to get kids to understand why barter is difficult, to understand why money is important as a medium of exchange and a store of value and a unit of account, and gives them some live action opportunity in a kinesthetic way to look at these concepts. So one of my favorites, we do this every year with our teachers in our money and banking course, and it's certainly one of the favorites that's out there. Another book that we all love, we've used extensively, lots of times it's used for 100th Day, is Alexander Who Used to Be Rich Last Sunday. And I would be remiss if I didn't include this book in there. I think this is a really great opportunity for, even if a school wants to just infuse one lesson, we certainly would hope that they would do a lot more, but a lot of schools will use this on 100th Day because $1 is 100 pennies. But I think sometimes schools are using it on 100th Day, but they're not necessarily getting at all the personal finance concepts that are in there. So this is a classic by Judith Vorsch. This was written in the 1970s, and it's still alive and well today. There's a little bit of dated stuff in there, payphones and things like that, but that's a just a great opportunity to infuse some additional history and talk about technology over time. There's been a number of different versions of this lesson. If you've seen me live, I oftentimes will take 100 pennies and put them between packing tape, clear packing tape, and that then creates then a strip of 100 pennies that are encased in plastic, and you can then have the students come up and cut off the amount of pennies that he spends, because he spends this dollar that he gets from his grandparents. Over the course of the week, he was going to save that dollar, and over time he spends it on a whole bunch of different items. And by the end, he hasn't gotten any closer to his savings goal because he spent his entire dollar. So in this version of the lesson, actually written by my colleague Mary Suter at the St. Louis Fed, the students first they count by twos. They count 100 pennies by twos to fill a container. So it's a great opportunity to get little kids counting by twos now, not just by ones, and then getting them to understand that that's the same amount as $1. And as I said, Alexander receives $1 from his grandparents, and then he spends it a little at a time on a whole bunch of different items, including some fines for being not a very good boy. And as you read the story, then the students can come up, and out of the container that you've already counted the 100 pennies into by twos, they can actually withdraw the money out of the container, so that you see how they can see visually how that dollar goes. And then the students discuss the choices that Alexander made, and give him some advice on how he could save his money to reach his savings goal of buying a walkie-talkie. So the concepts here are opportunity cost, that if you buy the half-melted candle, which is in fact one of the things he buys, that you're giving up then the opportunity in the future to be able to buy your walkie-talkie, or at least to buy it sooner. Savings goals, spending. We also have bar graphs here, so there's a bar graph activity, and then also the counting by twos. So some additional lessons, some additional books that are out there that you might consider. Some books that have been around for quite a number of years. Bunny Money is a great one by Rosemary Wells, a really great lesson for little kids, really young primary grades. This was actually the first children's literature lesson that I ever saw demonstrated many, many years ago, and so it's a really fantastic lesson. Counting with Common Sense, that's another one that you may or may not have seen. That lesson's out there on our website as well. Isabel's Car Wash by Sheila Bair, who was the head of the FDIC for many years. This is actually getting at entrepreneurship, so I think a really good opportunity in personal finance to teach about entrepreneurship to young kids as well. Who are entrepreneurs? Why are they important? Why is that a way of earning income? A famous one that everyone's seen and used many, many times from Mercer Mayer, Just Saving My Money. We have a lesson out there for that as well. Money, Money, Honey Bunny. So this is one of the bright and early books for beginning readers. And this is part of the Dr. Seuss franchise, if you will. A really great little lesson, again, about spending money. Great for kindergarten, great for first grade. Berenstain Bears, they're always famous. Whenever we do a Berenstain Bears program, we get a lot of interest in that program. We've done that in Philadelphia. We've done that in Bucks County. Berenstain Bears, Trouble with Money. We have a lesson out there for that. And the St. Louis Fed has a number of additional lessons as part of their Kiddynomics program as well that make use of the Berenstain Bears. The Case of the Shrunken Allowance, that's a great one that that's out there as well that you can make use of. And I'm only just showing you some of them. We have probably 10 to 15 additional lessons beyond just the ones that I'm mentioning here. Pickle Patch Bathtub. This actually is an important story. Great book set in rural Missouri in the, I would say, 1930s. The little kids in particular, want to save up the money to get a bathtub, which you see there in the cover. And what do they do in the end? Well, they have a savings plan. The savings plan doesn't work out. The savings plan really involves all of them saving their birthday money and their Christmas money for this bathtub. Because the father says, there's other things on the farm that they need to spend money on. Ultimately, what happens is these kids get together and grow cucumbers for pickles and sell them the cannery. And it's a great story about work and earning income and savings goal. The activity that we developed for this was that the students actually have pickle images that they actually write the parts of their savings goal or parts of their savings plan on, and then there's a bathtub. They write their savings goal, and it's their own savings goal. Whatever it is that they might be saving for, and then you actually staple with a little piece of string. You put those pickles together to attach to the bathtub. One of the things about this book is actually out of print, and this is one of the challenges of working with children's literature. We often will find a book, it's a great book, we write a lesson with it, and then over time it goes out of print. The nice thing today is that access to used copies is very prevalent. And I was just checking, there are quite a number of copies out on Amazon right now, some at quite reasonable prices, where you can actually get a used copy of this book and make use of the lesson that's available on our website. So one of my favorites. The nice thing also, it gives you some opportunities to talk about history and about how over time life has changed with technology, etc. So on our website at philadelphiafed.org/lessons, you can always get to our lessons page, and there you can find all of our lessons. You can find them sorted by grade level, and you can find the lessons that I've mentioned today, as well as quite a number more. We've also updated our website so that now all you have to do is philadelphiafed.org/training, and you can always find out what professional development programs we're doing. So we have our 5th annual Federal Reserve Personal Finance Day program for teachers. The lessons that we're going to demonstrate in this program are for grades 7 to 12, but certainly if you teach other grade levels and you want to come, you're absolutely welcome to come as well. This is 2.5 hours of professional development credit. We give you dinner and you get all the curriculum materials. It's a $10 registration fee, and that's October the 11th after school here at the Philly Fed. If you've never been here, we have a fantastic facility with lots of public parking that's close. We have a lot of garages and lots that are nearby here, and that information is on our website. So certainly go there to our website and register for that program. We have 2 more programs that are coming up this fall. For high school teachers, we have Math in the Real World. This is the first time we're doing those lessons. These were lessons that were developed by the Council for Economic Education. One of the authors was our own Hillary Hunt. So we're very excited to do a 2-night program using the Math in the Real World. This will be 5 hours of Act 48 credit. It'll be October 25th and November 1st after school here at the Philadelphia Fed. And again, you get a hot dinner at both of those sessions, all the curriculum materials, and that's just a $20 registration fee. And then my colleague Todd Zartman is going to be leading the high school economics program. That's great for middle and high school. Even though the lessons were originally written for high school, you can make easy adaptations to middle school classroom for those. That's October 26th, November 2nd, and November 16th after school, a total of 7 hours of Act 48 credit. You do need to attend all 3 nights. But that's actually at the Bucks County IU in Doylestown. So I hope that many of the people that are on the call today will choose to come to some of our programs, and we hope to see you soon. And I hope you'll make use of those lessons that are available on our website, whether you're going to be using them with an elementary school classroom or you're going to be getting your high school kids to get out there and teach those lessons to elementary school kids. I think they offer a really great opportunity to increase financial literacy amongst young people and to get a head start, make sure that they're up and going in the early grades in terms of building their financial capability. So Hillary, that's where I am. I wanted to know whether maybe there were any questions out there that I could answer for anyone.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Just